we talked about a lot of great things about Dak Faden. Rich, Shay, and I explained the secret to life and happiness, so I hope all you guys enjoyed that. And yeah, now we're back to Vintage Magic. On the top, we have Chris Bakula, aka also Tom Martell, playing Martello Shops. On the bottom, Randy Bueller on Grixis, Cabal Therapy, Young Pyromancer. Let's see, it looks like Pakula won the role. Both players. Have they kept? Have we already had mulligan decisions? The hands are pretty solid, not amazing, but good. Nope. Chris is gonna mulligan. His hand was weak to mental misstep, but otherwise seemed pretty good. He had a Mox to go with his Academy, right?
He did have a Mox. He had Mox into Sol Ring into tapping the Academy for a 2, which would have let him have his Lodestone Golem arrive, I believe.
Instead, he mulligans into a double workshop hand.
Now Chris will have to settle for turn 1 Chalice at 0 and his choice of Chalice at 1 and a...
Randy's also gonna mulligan.
Well, Randy kept the extremely powerful look at your hand and then pick my least favorite card.
Well, this game's going to be over, right? He's just going to play Chalice on 0, Chalice on 1, and turn 2 play Wormcoil Engine.
That should do it.
That should do it. There's really no outs to that.
Oh, I mean, he can also play Thorn, which I believe will also end the game in short order.
Are you getting away from your mic? It's getting very hard to hear you, or is it just me?
I'm not any further away than usual.
Heard that part.
All right.
So Chalice on 0, Chalice on 1. He's going to shut down Randy's entire hand and turn 2 Wormcoil Engine. This is a great draw from Chris. Perfect for this matchup.
So Randy's not playing a deck with Delver per se, but he's playing a deck with the Delver-ish Grow style mana base. And one of the shortcomings of those sort of decks are that they are very heavily focused on 1-drops.
Yeah, even without the second Chalice, he was in amazing shape. He still gets to play the Thorn, and the Wormcoil gets around that.
Yeah, he could have played either of those. And it looks like next turn he'll be able to deploy not 1 but 2 Sphere effects to make sure that Randy never gets to cast Dak Faden.
Right, Randy can cast a Demonic Tutor here, but there's nothing to really get.
No, the Pulverize is not in the main, and Wormcoil, when you get stomped on by a bunch of elephants, just breaks into smaller worms.
That's true. Wormcoil is a pretty good trump to Pulverize, and he doesn't have Double Mountain.
That's true, too. That's true, too.
This is just a fantastic draw from Chris. So I think he's going to go up a game here.
It's difficult to imagine Randy coming back from this.
Which would put him 1 game away from me playing against Shops 5 times in a row.
Well, it does seem like you put a lot of thought into the workshop matchup in your deck design.
Just a little bit. How did you say that?
Well, Kataki, Energy Flux, and just in the main deck, having Workshop destroying Wastelands, and the ability to go toe-to-toe with Mishra's Factories. As a Workshop player who was defeated by that makes life very difficult. You know, the whole idea of Workshops is to outmana your opponent. Here you can see that Chris Bakula, with his 2 land drops, has shut down Randy's ability to function because he's not only outmaned Randy, but played Chalices to cut off Randy's ability to play Moxen, and now he's deploying Spheres to exacerbate the problem.
But Randy went and got Strip Mine with his Demonic Tutor, which is basically the best land he could get, so he could cast Dak Faden next turn if Chris had nothing. Of course, right. Chris has everything.
Chris has the opposite of nothing. Is this a
Chalice on 3?
Chalice at 3, so this will shut down Dak Faden.
Yeah, Chris assuming that the tutor is going to go get Dak Faden. Turns out Randy already had Dak Faden. It's a 1-of in his deck, but he already had that one. I'm like, I'll just shut this one down preemptively.
Right. So for all the great things we've talked about for the Wormcoil Engine, the downside of Wormcoil Engine is that he's so good that you really don't want the greatest thief in the multiverse to take him.
The interesting thing is if Randy had drawn a Forcible over the last turn, I guess it would only have to be a turn because he would have countered the Wormcoil Engine.
Right.
He could actually counter this Chalice of the Void, play Dak Faden, and steal Wormcoil Engine, while instead leading on Sphere Sphere would have been able to potentially prevent that.
It's a transient observation. So this may have been the wrong play, even though it prompted a concession from Randy.
If he did have a Force of Will and one of the spheres got countered, it meant that if Randy had 2 lands, Chris would have had to draw something, or he wouldn't have been able to play the Chalice on 3 next turn because of his own sphere. He would have had to draw a land or a waste. I guess that's a land as well, but just something to be able to slow down the development of mana. Either another sphere, a Tangle Wire, a wasteland to strip mine, a land to just cast the Chalice. So it was an interesting spot for a game that wasn't very close. Throw some stuff out there.
Absolutely.
Randy, unfortunately, has no sideboard cards in this month, right?
Randy has Ingature, Mountain, 2 Pulverize.
2 Pulverize is going above beyond the Call of Duty.
Yes, yes. I found when I was playing against his deck that Pulverize was really hard to play around.
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, it's not shut down very easily by sphere effects. It's still only going to cost 1 or 2 mana. You guys played an interesting game where Wastelands, I guess, that did a lot of damage to potentially stop the Pulverize from ever being cast, just because it does require 2 red lands in play, which isn't always easy to do. Tangle Wire can also do some work to prevent getting just up to the 2 mana you might need through 2 sphere effects. So there's a few ways to slow it down. Of course, the land destruction. Having access to a card like Sundering Titan is pretty huge for being able to shut down actually casting the Pulverize through all the sphere effects, just because it can take out multiple lands at once. So a few more lock pieces versus the deck that you played against Randy, where you had a more aggressive approach and more outs to cards like Dakbin.
That's absolutely true, and it looks like Randy has gone on to the next level with his deck, where he's only playing the 1 Dak Faden.
Yeah, just
So
not as good against the Arcbound Ravagers and Triskelions.
right. So
Well, there's a Pulverize in the opening hand and a Force of Will, the 2 cards you kind of really want to see. Plus, Randy's on the play, so lots of great news for the Hall of Famer.
that looks exceedingly powerful. Now Chris has the ability to throw down a whole bunch of spheres. He can deploy those 4 spheres, and he has the mana to play all of them. Actually, he has 5 mana in his hand, but
You can only play
Randy,
1 on the first turn, though,
right, one on the first turn. But
which
the
is
fact
kind
that
of
he
rough
gets
for having
5
access to so much mana. But the sphere shuts down the next sphere.
it does look like Randy's going to be able to make his land drops and use a force of will if Chris would cross the line into where Randy couldn't cast Pulverize and then deploy Pulverize after that.
Yeah,
So
I'm
this
not
is
sure what
really,
Randy wants to do with these 2 cards. That's an interesting spot. Force of Will and Mountain are both interesting cards here.
they are.
Keep the Force.
I actually like them. I think that it's really hard for Chris to beat the plan of just running out mana. Now Chris drew a Wormcoil, and Wormcoil is just the sort of card that Randy may opt to counter. You see, Chris leading with a sphere, which means that if Randy chooses to counter this, then Chris can play a second sphere. And by
Chris would
not
be thrilled.
absolutely, and by not playing the land, Chris is bluffing the workshop, which could deploy that second sphere, even should the first arrive.
Which is still not that big a threat against Randy's hand of lots of lands and a Pulverize.
Right.
He's like, cast all the spheres you want. I've got plenty of lands. I can cast this Pulverize eventually, and it's gonna do work.
Absolutely. None of this is particularly scary to Randy.
I mean, Randy is a massive, massive favorite to win this game.
Oh yeah. I think we're all learning important lessons about Pulverize here.
Protection Probe was a good draw, just as something to ditch to Force of Will.
Yes, that's true. Evermind would have been a fine card there. That Randy doesn't tap out to cast it because that would take him off the ability to force.
So now, if Randy, this is an interesting spot. If Randy doesn't cast Pulverize this turn and doesn't draw a land, he could end up getting locked under spheres.
So this could be a chance for Randy to pull the trigger. If he doesn't draw a land, he'll be able to
It would, but
pulverize
it does leave Randy on, short on mana.
it.
Black
It
Lotus
leaves
means that he
Randy with
doesn't need
one
many.
mana, and it leaves Chris with 2 mana. But it's still going to be a 3 for 6. I mean, that's like what? That's an ancestral plus a hymn to Torek. That's pretty good.
Yeah, unfortunate for Chris, he didn't draw more lands and even got forced to play that Mox Pearl just so that he would. No, I guess he didn't have to play the Mox Pearl at all. He could have still cast the Thorn next turn. So I think that might have been a misplay.
So now we're in the spot where Chris has a 2 drop, an 8 drop, and a 6 drop to go with his one land.
Yeah,
And
he's gonna look to run some workshops together here.
yeah, it's not infrequently the case that the best thing that the Mishra's Workshop decks can do is draw a workshop, potentially 2 workshops. And
I think he's
Randy
just gonna
has
fire this off here. Sack the Lotus,
Pyromancer.
play the Pyromancer, and just run a Bolted at Epicula.
I like that just fine. It means that the Force of Will be able to create a token. This brings Chris to 15 and puts 3 power on the table with Randy threatening more.
Yeah. Plus, Chris's only land deals 2 damage to him every time he taps it.
Absolutely. This is a great spot for Randy, and if you think about every card ever printed in the game of Magic, the cards that would have done what Pulverize there did include Pulverize.
It's true.
Looks like Randy's opting to force the sphere.
Interesting.
I guess the sphere shuts down a lot of Randy's draws if he doesn't draw a second land.
Yeah, but Force of Will is pretty much game ending.
It is. Maybe he's keen to use it sooner rather than later because Chris is playing with Cavernous Souls.
Yeah, I don't think that makes a lot of sense. He's still multiple lands away from casting something. He could still cast the Force of Will also if it just needed to create one more 1/1. Plus, Pakul is taking 2 damage every spell he casts from Ancient Tomb, so I don't know. I mean, it's not going to matter, but
I guess that's true. I definitely see your point, but it's probably neither here nor there.
no, it's definitely not here.
So Chris is conceding the game, and that's once again an extremely impressive display of Pulverize.
Yeah, Pulverize has been great.
It has been. So if you're Chris, what do you have?
Well,
Do
you're not stopping Pulverize, but you do have 3 Wormcoil engines. That's
you
something.
do? You do. Wormcoil Engine gets around Pulverize reasonably well. Now, Pulverize isn't great against it. Dak Faden loves stealing Wormcoil engines. It's probably his favorite thing. So, but because Randy's only playing a single copy of Dak Faden, I like Wormcoil a lot.
Yeah, it's pretty good. Not a lot of other early drops for Chris. He's playing 3 copies of Homeward Path, which is not a card we've seen too much of in any format ever.
It's clever. I like it. It's
Hmm.
Homeward Path lets you get your Wormcoil back from Dak Faden. It's it taps for colorless mana, so it's never terrible. But these sort of decks have so many good cards competing for the slot of a land that taps for a colorless. There's there's Karakas, which would have been a good answer to Kataki. There's Buried Ruin to rebuy an artifact. There's Ghost Porter, which is a strip mine in a lot of matchups. It's tough. So now we're going into game 3, and Chris is on the play. So this game, he gets to lead with Lodestone Golem and Chalice of the Void, and That's something of a Skyla and Charybdis, where everything except Moxes cost more, but also you can't have any Moxes. Now, Chris's hand will beat most decks that don't have a Force of Will. Randy's hand has two Forces of Will. Only one mana, but two Forces. So I can't imagine wanting to throw back Randy's hand, even though it's not great, because he can Force of Will something and then throw a cantrip. And the the second dig through time is unlikely for him to cast. But on the other hand, he's going to be happy to pitch that to Force.
Yeah. Force of Will is great, although having two different art of Force of Will,
I cannot brook
I
that.
know.
I agree. That's thunderously disappointing.
My disappointment is very clear as well. Chris just loves his hands with Workshop. He likes to mulligan aggressively into Workshops. And having one your opening 7 is pretty sweet.
Oh, you can't blame him. I mean, Mishra's Workshop is
So
a
broken.
comfortable 3-for-1.
It is great.
It really is. With this hand, Chris is going to be able to play a game-ending threat on turn 1 and a Chalice, and then if that doesn't go well, or if it does go well, he can enjoy the hammer himself, called off the Forge Master, on turn 2. And to beat that, Randy needs some crazy hand with, I guess, two Forces, maybe even with different artworks.
Well, no one would ever have different artwork, so that's
I can't
unlikely to
even
happen, but he
imagine.
could have two Forces.
Maybe with the same artwork, sure.
All right. Where are we in this game? No one's mulliganing these hands, right?
I
So
can't imagine mulliganing these hands.
let's get some magic going.
Okay. So we are currently waiting for. So Chris has kept, and we're waiting for Randy to decide if he wants to mulligan.
No, I think Randy's already kept two.
Uh,
The action is on Bakula one way or another. Bakula's on the play. I don't know if neither player's decided mulliganing, but we do know. Oh, we are. I mean, no one's mulliganing. I'm pretty sure.
I, despite having mismatched forces and the wrong brainstorm art, I would still keep Randy's hand.
Yeah. Now that everyone's seen it, I guess. All right. Both players think it's on the other one, so probably
Okay.
some issue with the client will get worked out as quickly as possible.
Well, all right. Maybe they're, I don't know, hoping their Doomsday opponent runs out of time and they forgot what match they're in. So, okay. Looks like Randy is experiencing some technical difficulties.
All right. So how is this hand actually going to play out? He's going to play turn one Lodestone Golem and get it forced.
Well, I think I like
And Chalice
leading
on
with Chalice because Lodestone Golem is generally the bigger threat, so I like the
Yeah.
idea
So lead
of
for Chalice on one, and then well, I guess
no, no,
you
no,
have to
lead
make sure
lead
he
with
plays
Chalice
Soul
at
first.
0. I would actually lead with the Chalice
Chalice
at
on
0.
zero.
Yeah, Randy still plays some Moxes, and Chalice at 0 is so good with Lodestone Golem.
I don't know. I like Chalice for one against these blue decks so much. It's such a powerful card. While Chalice on zero is basically destroy one Mox at best. Well, he's getting punished for that line. Chalice becomes from a must counter to a do nothing.
So, what does Randy have? He has
If he
four
casts
zero
Chalice on
draw.
one, I don't think he could ever lose this game. But now,
Hmm.
Well, I guess it would have to be forced. The Forge Master would probably resolve, I guess I should say, not never lose this game.
That's a fair point. Certainly, with these hands, Chalice at one would have been better. Um, and now Randy gets the zero drop, but that can conveniently jump to the bottom of his library.
Yep, right where he wanted it, not on this first draw step.
Exactly. And instead, here's an ingot chewer.
No red mana yet.
No red mana. So I guess if Chris had played Chalice at one, that also would have prevented red mana because Randy wouldn't have drawn the Mox yet.
So Chris is getting punished again for not playing Soul Ring last turn. Otherwise, he would be able to play both spells this turn.
That's true. I'm not sure why he didn't play the Soul Ring.
I don't know. So if he had played Soul Ring last turn, Forge Master would resolve.
Yes.
Thorn would come down first, counter or no, whatever. Forge Master would come down. Although Randy would have four shots at it. He can draw a mountain or brainstorm into one. Any red source to ingot chewer it. So not the
Well,
end of the world, but he would have to force this thorn to do that. Or
he
else
would
he
have
wouldn't
to
be able to
force the
cast brainstorm.
Thorn. And if he let the Thorn resolve, then he would have to draw a mountain right now.
Right.
Instead,
Also, if he had played Chalice on one at any point, this game would have been completely different.
that's true. That's true. I don't dislike Chris's play of playing Chalice Zero, but uh,
He would have missed on the red mana, so Chris would have won this game.
playing the Soul Ring, I think, is certainly that would have been effective.
Yeah, that's pretty indefensible with his actual hand or his actual deck. I mean, the chalice I think can go both ways. I'm pretty huge proponent of playing chalices on one when you can, especially with a hand that good. Just want to shut down some of the digging. The card you're most afraid of is Pulverize, so being able to shut down, four probes, four preordains, brainstorm, ponder is pretty nice. Ancestral, of course,
Yeah, that's
but
true. That's
but
true.
not playing the Soul Ring is just. I mean, I think Chris is a pretty big underdog in this game, and it would have been almost over.
Yeah, I can only imagine that Chris was playing around Pulverize.
Pulverize on turn zero?
I can't imagine why else Chris wouldn't have played Soul Ring, right?
I
It's
think
not
he
like he
just
needed
forgot about things like Thorn is the draw that punishes
thought
him the
about
most.
Soul Ring.
Sphere doesn't do it quite the same because he couldn't cast Sphere, let it resolve, and still be able to cast his Forge Master. Although, if he tried to play Sphere, it's likely that Randy would have countered that anyway, so Forge Master would have still resolved. So either way, it would have worked out much better. It happens he drew the perfect card to punish him for the mistake.
That's true. That's true. I don't think there's a great reason not to play it. And
Yeah.
honestly, a sphere is just so good in this position anyway.
So
So
Chris had one of the best draw. Does he think his chalice is on? No, he didn't play the Mox. Like, I'm trying to think if he thought his chalice was on one or something.
huh.
I guess he couldn't though because preordained and brainstorms keeps getting cast.
That's true. And it looks like Randy's he's gonna be able to play a young pyromancer, and next turn he's gonna be able to dig. This is shaping up really,
This
really
is where
nicely.
Chris draws the worm coil to punish himself for not playing the Soul Ring again.
He drew a goblin piker.
That works too.
Well, you can take off the Dak Faden line, I guess. Not all
Yeah,
that.
not that Dak Faden does anything on this board.
Well, otherwise, Dak Faden could have stolen the Phyrexian Revoker. So, Randy drew. Randy drew Demonic Tutor, right?
Good.
It's a powerful card. I think I just like leaving the black open and digging through time here.
Yeah, he can blow up the Thorn first so that the dig is cheaper. Or he's
That's
killing the
true.
Revoker.
But his
Interesting.
graveyard's pretty full anyway.
Yeah, I guess you can just delve an extra card now. Yeah, Randy's in great shape in a game that I'm not sure was winnable.
That's true. So Randy's opting not to dig there. I actually liked digging there because it's possible that he would have found a strip mine.
Hmm? It's potentially a card. Actually, yeah, I mean, it's going to resolve, but Force of Will is not going to do anything because of the Thorn, but Randy has a lot of good ways to handle this now after sideboard.
That's
Most,
true.
most of them are Ingature, but actually, basically everything does it. He can Demonic Tutor for Pulverize, so I guess he would need 5 mana for that, so can't just Demonic Tutor for Pulverize and cast them both, because it would be... No, it
If
would
you
only be 4 mana,
a
yeah.
fetch land or a volcanic island, you can do it.
Yeah.
So for this not to work, Randy has to miss a fetch land or a volcanic island
Or
or a
Pulverize
regular
itself.
island, I guess, because he could just tutor up an ingot chewer.
Yeah.
So I think any land will actually let Randy deal with a Forge Master.
Well, there's a Pulverize in the pile, so he can Demonic Tutor for red mana if he wants to at
That's
this point.
that's true. I also see there's an ingot chewer, so I guess now Randy has the tough, difficult decision of whether he wants to throw away a mountain and a demonic tutor to chew up a couple extra Moxen from Chris. But, the fact that Randy's in a spot where he has a lot of really good options, that's bad news for Chris here. So the whole deck that Chris is playing, Martello, is built on making Kaldoth the Forge Master tap to win the game. It's basically a battle of wits, but instead of having 200 cards in your library, you have a bunch of Atrop artifact robots in your deck. So looks like Randy he took a fetch land and an ingot chewer. So looks like he is opting to play the ingot chewer,
Sure.
which means that he's not at this point worried enough to pull the trigger on throwing away his 2 lands to blow up Chris's board.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really think there's much that punishes him, although Worm Coil Engine, if Chris had lands, could.
So Wormcoil Engine, by not casting the Demonic Tutor this turn, Randy could actually play around that. He could Demonic Tutor for Dack Faden.
You could.
It looks like he is casting Demonic Tutor this turn. Pulverize means that the only thing he can really lose to is Wormcoil Engine. Dack Faden's interesting. Dack Faden's very interesting. So Chris draws Phyrexian Metamorph. Metamorph tends to be better when Chris already has a Wormcoil Engine in play. Metamorph's also really good in the mirror match because it lets you copy your opponent's Crucible of Worlds. The problem for Chris here is that there's nothing particularly spectacular to Metamorph. Well, Monastery Mentor would trigger off of Chris playing extra Moxen. Randy's Pyromancer doesn't. In fact, in this matchup, there are times when the fact that Pyromancer is more selective about what he'll trigger off of is actually an attribute, as opposed to the monks being a little looser about what he'll consider worthy of making a token.
Well, that card's going to put it away. Dack Faden can
Oh,
just steal the Young Pyromancer, and even if Chris was able to play something like Worm Coil, Randy can Time Walk, make
wow.
multiple tokens off it, plus Dack, and then next turn steal the Worm Coil and kill Chris. So,
Yeah, this
a
is
multitude of riches.
that's true. A lot of me's.
So many shays.
So yeah, I think this is just about over. I'm sure that Chris is probably thinking how if he draws a Forge Master, he could run that out and then untap and use it before Dak Vaden can steal it. But if that happened, he'd just feel even worse when Randy casts Time Walk to proliferate the counter on Dak Vaden. And that's the match. So you and Randy have both cut through this field by deciding that losing to Mishra's Workshop was not in your agenda.
That is how it worked out. Randy had to beat a couple of Doomsday decks along the way, but a couple of Shops decks as well. I faced mono Shops.
That's true. That's true. You defeated me on Workshop, and I think that you made great calls by picking decks that did really really powerful things against Mishra.
Yes, I do not like Mishra, and I wish her to go down.
Yeah, Energy Flux, Gataki.
I guess it's probably him, Mishra and Urza. All
Right,
right.
right. It's Brothers War. Brothers War, not the Brothers and Sisters War, but the A does throw you off.
All right, we're going to take a quick break, and then I'll play Randy. See how it goes.
All right.
Be right back.